On today's episode of Winning the Moment, we actually have an NFL player with us. He is my brother-in-law, Scott Young, and he's going to tell his story from starting baseball when he was in preschool all the way up to playing in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. And there's so many great stories. You're going to love it. And we've got some really awesome notes at the end. So stay tuned to listen and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the episode. I remember when you joined the family thinking like, damn it, I can't be the cool uncle now. This guy's been in the NFL. What am I going to do? You know? So Scott, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Cody. This is awesome to actually have this experience. Come in here, catch up with you, chat. You know, love what you're doing. So this is great.
Well, I'm just so excited. I'm obviously a huge sports fanatic, and obviously my book and podcast, Winning the Moment, so much of it was built in the lessons I learned in like youth sports. Right? Because I feel like youth sports built so much of my understanding of people and teamwork and winning and losing and working hard for something and understanding like the arc it takes to get there. And so I've just always been a huge sports fan. And so I can't wait to like tell some stories from your time in football, some of your takeaways, some of your lessons learned. And so we can kind of just start with a backstory, and you can start that wherever you want, but maybe just tell the audience a little bit about who you are.
Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of loaded, but
it is loaded. Yeah. So start wherever you want.
Grew up in Sandy, Utah. 42 years old now. I feel like I'm half that age. I mean, my body feels about 60-ish somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in Sandy. I went to Hillcrest High. Was a standout athlete there. Fortunately, thanks to my mom and her support and like, you know, giving me everything she could to, you know, be involved in sports growing up. Like,
were you recruited everywhere?
Yeah.
Well, who was the biggest school that recruited you, would you say?
I would say I don't ever like to look back, hindsight being 2020, of course.
Sure.
I don't like looking back at something and saying, well, I should have signed with USC and won a national championship. But Pete Carroll wouldn't leave me alone when I actually had made it when it came to Dixie. So Dixie State when it was a junior college.
Yeah.
Utah Tech when it was a junior college. Pete Carroll, Lou Holtz, you name it.
Wow.
Coach Ogeron, I mean, you name it, every single one of them had recruited me and offered me
Was Coach O at LSU at that time?
ASU.
He's at ASU.
Or no. U of A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I tripped to ASU and U of A. It was U of A. He was the D-line coach there, and so I didn't even know who he was. I walk in, I couldn't understand him.
Oh, he's so hard to understand.
He just kept talking about Dwayne Rock Johnson and Warren Sapp, and I was just like, you're feeding me all the right stuff, but I can't really understand you.
And did you play defense in high school, or did you only play offense?
No, in high school, I played defense and offense.
Oh, you did?
I went both ways.
What were you better at?
It was a mix because I had BYU offer me a scholarship at offensive line, and Utah State told me I could play either side, and you know, Idaho State, SUU, Weber, a lot of local and regional schools that offered me, and they're like, you pick what you want to play. You're that caliber of athlete. And
what did you like better?
Defensive line.
Yeah.
Hands down. I mean, O-line was just not my thing. Like the rhythmic step here. It's just
defense is more just like instincts.
Yeah. Instincts, attack,
go
react,
get the ball.
Like, yeah. And like the aggression of it and like kind of just let loose versus you've all got to step right and use this foot left. And like, it's just systematic, I guess you could say. It's too controlled for me.
Less feel and more structure.
I was natural at it.
Yeah.
I mean, but like it wasn't really hard going from being like a Division I DN, D tackle, nose guard. I played them all. It wasn't hard transitioning to offensive guard. It was actually easier. It was just hard learning these playbooks and constantly.
I couldn't imagine the playbooks. Like watching the Netflix series for the quarterbacks, you know, that new series is out. It's awesome. And you hear their play calls and like all the plays, and it's just like, God damn, how did you guys memorize all that?
I don't know. I was always told Coach Reed's playbook is by far the largest, and I have to agree. Like I had experience in a couple other programs, but his installs, some of his main installs when you actually got through training camp.
Yeah.
And the variations per team and per defense that you're actually going against. Some of those installs were as big as some teams' playbooks for the whole year.
That's crazy.
And it just would unload on you. Yeah, they're all variations, and for an offensive line or offensive lineman, it doesn't change that much. It still is an adjustment because all your calls change, all your view of it, like defense changes, like who's actually making the calls, who's responsible for what, like whether it's the center, which when I was in Philadelphia, it was a lot geared off the actual center. But it's kind of weird. It would be like the center would make a base call, like Donovan McNabb or any of the,
You
Jeff
played
Garcia.
with Brian Westbrook too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Probably one of my highlights, which also was a low light, was in not championship game, but like a divisional round playing the Saints. I didn't start the game. I came in right after maybe a series or two.
Yeah.
Sean Andrews, like he did something to his neck and like they basically were like, you're in. And I'm like, I didn't get any reps all week long. All I was doing was showing scout and I was the sixth man on the line. So I basically had to play anywhere
that they needed you.
Yeah. And so Sean goes down, they throw me in the game, and I believe it was that first or second series, I sprung Brian Westbrook right off my ass for like a 70-yard touchdown.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I do have, a lot of experience and things that were more or less blessings to me, if you want to call it that. Like right time, right place. But I was fortunate to have, an amazing team I played with and on, pretty much my entire career.
That's so cool. So when you were being recruited, why did you go to Dixie? Was it grades or what brought you to a junior college?
The presumption that when I was in high school, things have definitely changed because like your Nebraskas, Oklahomas, Florida States, they were still like the dominant teams in the country back then.
Yeah.
But, regionally, like you kind of grow up with this stigma of, oh, you got to leave home. Don't go to BYU, Utah State.
Like you didn't make it unless you get to a big D1 outside of Utah.
Correct. And to a certain degree, that's true. I mean, if I would have signed with USC, Mike Patterson, who I played with in Philadelphia, D lineman, who ended up having a pretty stellar career, Mike Patterson wouldn't have got a scholarship. One of the first things he did when we showed up to rookie camp was he thanked me for that. I wish I could have got some of his signing bonus.
Wow.
But if I would have gone to USC, I would have been graded higher because they look at the level of talent you're competing against and not only the level of talent. Just because you're affiliated with a certain program, you already come up probably a round or two in the draft. I mean, that's just how it is.
Right. It's just like someone who goes to a better school for academics, they're instantly thought to be more intelligent, whether it's true or not. They've got that Harvard or Stanford degree.
That stigma, for sure. And so coming up and through high school, and like when I was like figuring out where I was going to trip, Utah was like my number one, BYU. Like I actually really wanted to go to one of those schools, but then I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, I need a more clear channel or opportunity to get to the NFL. And I'm like, this is my one.
So your goal was always to get to the NFL. Like you thought when you were in high school, I'm working towards going to the NFL. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was more talented at baseball, but.
Oh, really? I didn't ever know that.
Yeah. I was a phenomenal baseball player, and that sounds arrogant. I'm just saying, like,
no, it's just the truth. It's okay to be good at something.
Yeah. I was a phenomenal athlete, but like for some reason, baseball, just hand-eye coordination, everything else. I mean, maybe it was not having many friends growing up.
You must have just smashed the shit out of that baseball.
Oh, yeah.
What position did you play?
I actually played all over. I played a lot of outfield, center field, third base. I pitched a little bit, but yeah, you put me on the field anywhere, and I was decent in most positions, but I'm in standout in some other ones. So that's kind of, I think I hit major burnout way too young. Like 8th, 9th grade, I was playing advanced and on all-star teams with kids that were playing summer ball or fall ball.
Right.
That were on the high school team. Kids were driving to practice, and I was probably barely hitting puberty.
Yeah, right.
So it was different for me that, I played up a couple years.
Yeah.
And then like I lost all like you don't go to school with the kids you're playing with, and you kind of lose interest in it.
Sure.
And I'd played it since I was little, 5 years old, playing t-ball with my sister. I had played it, and it was just what I did. I mean, I played soccer, I played basketball, I played other sports, but it wasn't until, 8th, 9th grade, where I got cut from a team. I was the last person to get cut.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the kid, I won't say his name.
From baseball?
Yeah. Coach Daniels, the coach I had at Hillcrest High at the time, he basically pulled me aside between me and this other kid, and he's like, you'd have easily made my team, but he's like, you didn't play on my fall ball last year. I'm like, well, I played football for the first time, and he's actually like an assistant defensive coordinator, a DB coach on the same program.
Yeah.
But he's like, well, you didn't play in my fall ball. So he's like, you've got to get into that before you can make my team. All these other guys have done all this, and it just stung. I'm looking at a kid that couldn't hold my jock strap.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he just made the team.
Just because you didn't play the game.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. So I'm like, you know what?
And you had just started playing football at that time?
Yeah. So my parents wouldn't let me. I came home my 9th grade year, and I just had a couple buddies that were like, they'd been hounding me for years. Like, you got to play. And I was like, I walked in the door. I told my mom, I'm like, there's absolutely no way I'm not playing football at this point in time. I'm like, I'll forge your signature. I'll do whatever I have to do. I'm playing football. And I think she saw the sincerity in my voice, or heard the sincerity in my voice, and saw me and was just like, well, here we go. Another.
So you didn't actually play until high school?
No. Wow. My mom wouldn't support it. My dad wouldn't support it. And it just, it was something that, it was always, you'll get hurt.
Would you now, if you had a son, would you let him play football?
Sorry.
That's right.
I'll just ask that again. I mean,
if you had a son now, would you let him play football?
No, I don't believe. I mean, ultimately, you're going to support your kid in whatever they choose to do. And
because Cash loves it. Like, that's the sport he likes the most. And he's playing flag football now, and he just loves it. And it's fine now, but it's like, man, once you get those helmets on and you start cracking each other, it's like, gosh. Can he just play golf or something?
Yeah, you know what? That's like one of the most commonly asked questions I get is like people just like, they're just like, oh, you took it basically as far as you can go. And like, they're like, with concussions and all the stuff that's come out about brain trauma and injuries and like, they're just like, would you let your son play? And I'm like, no, I would rather see him use his brain first and see how far he could take that. But like, if he was interested in sports, for sure, I'd support him what he wanted to do. But I think I would try and steer him into something that, I mean, I suffer from, like, I've been basically diagnosed with CTE.
Yeah.
And that's through like,
because you were a lineman, so you're hitting every play, you're having contact.
Yeah. And I was a head hitter. I mean, as much as my coaches, even at the time, were like, pull your head out of it, use more of your hands, I still used my head to lift people up. And so I could actually get leverage under their pads. And I hit all the time. I broke titanium face masks left and right. I broke clips on my helmet. Like, and this is from like high school up. Like, I was breaking clips every single game. Which wasn't normal, but when you get to the level of NFL and everyone's as big or bigger than you and as strong or stronger than you, that like physics is physics. You both hit each other. It's whoever's going faster and whoever's bigger. And at that level, everyone's big and everyone's fast and everyone's strong. So my technique had to catch up, which was a little bit further behind, and I had to,
because you were just naturally athletic, so you got away with like not as good a technique because you were just so athletic.
Correct. And I mean, we weren't playing with leather helmets by any stretch, but you go back 15 years,
right?
I guess 13 or whatever it's been, and there was still the 3-man wedge on kickoff return. I'd never played special teams outside of like, PAT field goal.
Yeah.
And obviously the defensive side of that, I'd never played special teams in my life.
Yeah.
I was generally playing both ways, and like I didn't, and so getting into the NFL, and they're like, "Oh, you're playing special teams." I'm like, Coach Harbaugh's like, "Get your ass out there," and I'm like, "I don't play special teams."
Which Harbaugh did you play for?
John.
Okay.
he embarrassed me in front of the whole team.
Was this with the Eagles or what? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he's just like, "Yeah, you are." He's like, "Everyone plays special teams," and he's like, and he just, I mean, basically told me like,
"You're doing it no matter what."
And so I actually earned his respect by actually taking over the 3-man wedge and then like getting good at it, and then doing it in, I don't know, 30-something preseason games or whatever, and a bunch of regular season games. But I will tell you, it's the most abusive thing I've ever done in my life.
The kickoff
return, when they had the 3-man wedge and I was up back in the center,
So tell me and the listeners what that means.
So if it's been outlawed now, like the rules have changed.
Is this on the offensive side? So you're receiving the ball?
Yeah. So you're receiving the ball. You're right, basically in front of the returners or two returners.
Okay.
And you're sitting on like the 20-yard line.
Yeah.
And you have two other guys wings on you, one on the left, one on the right. And your job as up back is to time that ball and actually get 13 yards in front of the ball where the guy actually returning the ball catches it. So you have to time that, and you're not looking at anything. You lose the field. You're just looking at the ball running. You're doing whatever you can to try and get that timing down because the whole return's based off of you.
Yeah.
So you've got to actually yell go. You're sticking your arms out. People are actually coming in, grabbing your arms, and about that time you're actually looking back at the field, and you have a certain wedge, a certain angle, or a certain blocking scheme depending on where the kicker kicks the ball and what obviously kickoff team you're against. So if you envision this, you've got wedge breakers who most of them.
Oh, so their goal is to break the three of you up.
Correct. It's like a bowling ball.
They're just slamming their bodies into you at full speed.
Yep, it's a bowling ball. So you take basically somebody who's more likely a big linebacker who's just a backup. And they've got this guy so ramped up, they're just like, all we need you to do is hit that up back.
Right, and the only chance for them to play something outside of special teams is to make an impact play now.
And so I was constantly going against these guys that were just trying to kill me. And I
don't want to laugh, but it's just like, it's so barbaric. It's like when you watch the old Civil War tapes and the war guys just ran at each other. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, and I was between 330 to 320 pounds, depending on the time of the season. And these guys that were coming down, these wedge breakers, a lot of them were like anywhere from like 240 to some of them were up towards a 270.
Yeah.
But I have no head start. I'm literally just got my feet planted. I'm just barely like getting my bearing on who's coming down and trying to find the number of the wedge breaker. And lots of times I was getting hit as I was finding him. Like literally, it was
almost like a blind side.
Yeah. So I can say I'd probably be doing a lot better in life if I hadn't been hit so many times. Because I had to do this. You got to envision I did this through practice almost during the padded practices for special teams. I was doing this for like 20 minutes. And it was just hit.
Oh, God.
And I mean, I probably shouldn't have got out of it pretty clean as far as injury wise.
Yeah.
Because I had damaged my AC joint. I had done some nerve damage and stuff, but I got out of it. But I think a lot of that was just because I was a freak in the weight room and, probably one of the stronger people in the whole NFL. So for me,
didn't you have like the bench press record at the combine for a long time? You set the record, right?
Yeah, I did. And no excuses aside, I went in and was projected to hit 56, which I think right now would be
56
the record.
presses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I went in and I had actually, before the Las Vegas All-American Bowl, or after the Las Vegas All-American Bowl my senior year, I came back and my strength coach was like, we got to see where you're at. You're projected to go into Indianapolis and shatter the record. And I'm like, okay. But I'm like, I haven't been lifting the last few weeks. I'm like, he's like, we got to see where you're at. I'm like, all right. Cause I'd been hitting religiously 52 to 58, say reps.
Yeah.
And that was for like multiple years. I wasn't just like peaking. So I go in, I lay down on the bench and I do like a little bit of a warm up. I think I made it like around 30 reps and I went down and went to go back up. And it felt like somebody took a flaming red hot hanger and just stuck it right in my armpit. Oh. I could feel it burn all the way down and it actually tore my pec. And I'm like 4 weeks out from the combine at this point in time.
Oh, no.
And so I couldn't bench all the way till the week of. And when I went into the combine, I was fully expecting to tear my tear my pec off in front of all these coaches, GMs, scouts. And thankfully it didn't happen, but I was so fatigued. I think I hit something like 47 reps.
Yeah.
And they didn't end up counting a couple of them. Like the last one they didn't count because they didn't lock it out. But I was just like, I don't want to tear my pec and get injured on the bench.
So you could have
press.
done even more.
I could have pushed it.
You're still in like the top 10, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I stayed in that like top 2 or 3 for quite a while, and then there were a couple freaks of nature that came out.
Yeah, just recently.
Yeah, that just blew through it. And I'm like, I mean, that's to be expected.
Yeah,
kids
everyone's going to get stronger, bigger, faster as time goes on.
And now these programs have kids like starting these types of like trainings in middle school.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We didn't do that in middle school. Like we barely even worked out.
To give people perspective on the strength of Scott Young, we were in Lake Powell on a houseboat. Remember we got in that windstorm, and like we were in the boat. We thought it was going to capsize. We were fishing, and we get back to the houseboat, and the houseboat had like completely like unanchored itself, and Scott is in the water just holding the houseboat up by herself, stopping it from going further. I'll never forget that. Oh man. Okay, so you go to Dixie State because you wanted to go to a junior college. You could build up the opportunity to get to like a USC or Arizona. Was that your thought process in going to Dixie State?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I came down here. I had some good influences on me that I still like. They're still some of my favorite people, you know, and I trusted them, and they're just like, hey, if you give up these scholarships to these local D1s, the coach at the time, Coach Croshaw, was like, you tell me where you want to go and I'll get you there. And I'm like, it's not that I didn't believe him, but it's kind of like at the time I'm like, okay, I'm rolling the dice here. Like, it's a big gamble because I'm giving up
because you had a guaranteed D1 already to like Utah or BYU.
Utah State, there were a few of them, and I gave that up and went on a whim down to St. George, and I had the opportunity to play with a lot of really good. I mean, our team was unbelievable. It was stacked full of D1 talent that, you know, maybe got in trouble, didn't clear the NCAA.
That's what the JUNCO does, right? Mm-hmm. All the great athletes who have, for one reason or the other, didn't get to go to the D1 route, and so that they always have such good athletes.
Yeah, so most of them scholastically or physically needed a couple years to catch back up or to get to where they should have been, but they were incredible athletes that just I came down to Dixie, and you know, I think after like the first or second game, Pete Carroll and, you know, Norm Chow and his whole program, well, they were just hitting me up every week and saying, you got to get here.
What did that feel like? Because I mean, you're only 18, 19 at that time, and you've got all these incredible coaches, you know, like pillars of the college football community reaching out to you. What was that like?
I think it's tunnel vision. I mean, I think I had tunnel vision on, you know, just college football. I want to play in the NFL. Yeah. So to me, it wasn't that I was taking the opportunities for granted or looking past it. It was just like, who's Pete Carroll? I mean, literally, I go on a recruiting trip with him. I meet, you know, I met some, I can't even think, let's see, Matt Liner and
I was going to ask, was that like the Reggie Bush era?
Yep. And to get me back for turning them down. And then, I mean, I turned them down for good reason. My mom ended up getting breast cancer and congestive heart failure, and she was told she had 2 to 3 months to live. I wasn't going to move to LA. So I moved back up to BYU. They had a phenomenal year.
That's why you went to BYU, so you could be by your family. I never knew that. Yeah,
so I went to BYU off of like a personal choice and to be closer to home and whatnot. And, you know, I mean, it ultimately was a good choice. It kept me out of trouble. I was a little shithead at the time. And
LA, you get in a lot of trouble down there.
But yeah, that team came up to Provo my senior year, and that's when they won the national championship, and they stomped us. I mean, I think they beat us by 3 touchdowns or something. Yeah. But we had an incredible team. We just lost some talent to, you know, some off-season trouble. I think we lost it was like 12 players that year.
Oh no.
I mean, and there were players like transferring to like Oklahoma, like good talent. Like we were, when Coach Croton was at BYU, there was probably some of the most talented teams, you know.
How'd you do adhering to the honor code?
I skirted the line, but I never got caught, so I would say I did good. Like I lived in the football house. And
you can't even have, or I guess you probably could have soda, but back then were you even allowed to have soda?
No.
I didn't think so.
Nope. Yeah, I think it was all caffeine free.
Yeah.
And it I think things have loosened up quite a bit. Like you see players with longer hair, you see people with beards, and I mean, you could get a beard card, but I got chased out of the student center one time.
A beard card?
Yeah. Like if you had like a skin condition or like whatever, like you could get a beard card, but it was like a whole process.
So you could have a beard. So they'd ask you, like, do you have your beard card? You'd have to show it.
And a lady chased me out of the student center one day because I had like maybe a little bit more than 5 o'clock shadow. And I'm like, I mean, to me,
That's
I went
hilarious.
there. I'd put my earrings in as I was like leaving the like student center. I'd put my earrings back in, go to my house. And I stuck to myself. Even though I made a lot of really good friends at BYU.
Yeah.
And I really am humbled to say, there are amazing people there and they treated me well, but I was still a black sheep. I was one of the 5 guys on the team with the tattoo, and I didn't go on a mission. So you get this stigma where everyone hands you a Book of Mormon. You're like, dude, I grew up LDS in the church. I don't need a Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Did you tell him my last name's Young, bro?
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother, try going to Philadelphia during the Warren Jeffs and Big Love days.
Oh yeah.
Where that's like just hitting the world scene, and just on every streaming platform at the time, it's all about Utah and BYU and polygamists and LDS people. So here I am, Scott Young from Brigham Young University, BYU.
Yeah.
And from Utah, I get to Philadelphia. I can't tell you how many times people like pull me aside seriously, being like, so how many wives did your dad have? And I'd be like, dude.
Even traveling for me when I was younger professionally, like I went to a training in Lubbock, Texas, and everyone really thought, like, because it was me and another guy from Utah, like, so like, how many wives do you guys have? And like, how weird is it? Like it was a thing back then.
Yeah, it was. And it was almost a black eye, but it also coordinated to, there was like Chad Lewis on the team. Justin Enna was there briefly, Reno Mahe, and then obviously Coach Reed. And then some of Coach Reed's staff had actually come from BYU. And so it's not that the team wasn't somewhat familiar with it, but I think they were all really curious,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I get it and all. I mean, I'd probably feel a little weird going to Notre Dame or some other school,
Sure.
that's more, religious geared and backed by more, one demographic or a majority of one demographic than just
being a little more diverse.
School.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So you went to the combine. You did that. What was the combine like? Was that pretty intense?
It was. I think that was like one of the first times where I had one of those oh shit moments, because I went in there. I'd only pulled my hamstring one time ever in my life.
Yeah.
And I went in there with a pulled hamstring, partially torn or torn pec that was still obviously 3-4 weeks away from the actual injury. And so my fear was, I'm supposed to go break all these records. I'm supposed to just go shatter this thing. And I'm like, I had people who had gone give me their experiences and tell me, oh, this is that kind of how it goes. It went nothing like they said. I get to the plane, and there's a couple other Utah players, or linemen like Chris Kamatu and like me, and just there's like Brady Papinga. There were a few, really talented athletes who were on the same plane. We're all just like, well, let's do this. We get there, and it just, I think I felt more like a beef cow going to slaughter than anything.
That's kind of what I was going to ask. Like, because you're just getting poked and prodded, and you're just on display.
Oh yeah, and it's insane because you go check in. My roommates were Chris Myers, and his best friend from Miami was Frank Gore.
Oh, wow.
I walk into my room. Chris Myers is my roommate. I don't even know him. And this guy's sitting there, and I'm just like, who the hell is this? Well, it's Frank Gore. Ends up, he's going to be a Hall of Fame running back.
Yeah, right.
And I'm just sitting here like, I didn't watch Miami. I didn't care what Miami was doing at the time. You know what I mean? Like, and so come to find out, a couple of the guys that were my first roommates at the combine end up having storied careers. I mean, Chris had a long career in Denver.
Yeah, it's amazing how long Frank Gore played. I mean, he just kept being good for so long.
And he's just a tank. He avoided the injuries, and he just, I think some of it was luck, but I mean, a guy of that caliber still has to be dedicated, and that person has to have his priorities in mind actually to stay on the field that long and learn the playbooks and like just, beat out the competition, because every week somebody's showing up trying to beat you out.
Well, and that's wild too, because you're with all of these other incredible athletes, where so much of your life being the athlete that you are, you're just the best athlete wherever you are. And then now you're in this place where it's all those same guys.
Correct.
All coming down to one, and you really got to see who's the best, who's the fastest, who's the strongest, who's the smartest.
Yep. And you get fed all this stuff when you go there, because you've got, I had meetings with like the Cowboys, Philadelphia, a few other organizations that were set up for, I think it was day 2. And they split it up because they they do a big portion of medical, check everything that has ever been documented medical in your medical history. Then they do scholastic, and they do a lot of the testing and like some crazy testing that are like 400 questions, but they're psychologists.
Yeah, it's like move this triangle into this thing or something like that, like those games where you have to show like your intelligence level.
There are some of that, but there's also some that are like seeing if you're a liar and like
oh wow,
seeing how sincere you are. Like they'll ask you the same question in 10 different variations
and see how true north your answer is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that, but then there's the physical part, which I'm like, I'm going to blow through this.
Yeah,
like, I'm looking at all the guys around me. I'm like, all these other O-linemen don't even stand a chance. I mean,
were you that big at that time? Because like when you were in the NFL, you were so big. Were you that big when you were at the combine?
I would say I was average to medium average. I mean, okay. Maybe a little less on because you had a lot of like offensive tackles that were there that even Calvin Armstrong, who ended up being, I roomed with him my first year in Philadelphia. He's 6'8", 340 pounds. And that's where I first met him. And there were a lot of people like that where they're freaks of nature. You know, they were smart. They actually played on good programs, and they were talented players, like not taking anything from them. But they weren't like anything crazy in the weight room or anything like.
Sure.
They weren't running 4.7 40s or anything.
Is that what your 40 was?
No, it was like 4.9.
Okay.
High 4.9.
Yeah.
But that was literally I tweaked my hamstring after I'd pulled it, like doing like I think 3-cone or something, and I couldn't even go full steam. But I'm like, I was just praying, just like with the bench. I'm like, don't blow it out in front of everybody.
Yeah, that'd have been worse, right?
Yeah, it would have been bad, because then that injury question comes up. Oh, how many times this guy been injured? But my whole thing was just to get through that. And
did you leave the combine feeling like, okay, that was good for me, or did you leave feeling like, oh fuck?
I left the combine and got on a flight, and the guy that sat next to me was bragging about some athlete that just broke the NFL bench record.
And that was you.
It was me.
That's awesome.
And I had to turn to the dude, and I'm like, that was me.
That's cool.
And his jaw hit the floor, because it was in the USA Today. It made top 10 on ESPN's highlights. Like it blew it up.
Yeah.
But it would have been so much better if I would have gone in there not injured.
Healthy.
I mean, and excuses aside, I'm just saying the facts of the thing. Like when we got into that room, and I met Chris and Frank, and we were getting ready and like just kind of filling things out.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I got hit with the mandatory drug test at 5:00 in the morning, and they door knocked me at 4 a.m. And then they're like, oh, you're not doing anything physical today. You're going to just do all like, testing and stuff, and you'll get breakfast and stuff. So I took my drug test, went back to the room, and got another knock on the door. And they're like, where are you? Why did you come back? And I'm like, well, I don't know. And they're just like, you need to be down here with the rest of the linemen. Dude, they threw me in a line to do bench right then and there. I hadn't ate breakfast. I'd been up, and I waited 3 hours because it's just, it's cows to slaughter. You're just
waiting for your turn.
There's 40 linemen or whatever there is at each combine waiting in a line. And me with my last name, I'm always at the back of the line. I'm waiting, hours to get this done. And it wrecked my world, because I'm like, I was
you were not mentally ready.
Yeah, I was regimented with protein shakes and breakfast and overeating, not like starving and not going off 4 or 5 hours of sleep and the pressure of it all. So it was a trip, though. The combine was a trip. I mean,
did you have a team that you thought was going to draft you, or that you hoped to be drafted by?
I thought Dallas was.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's part of the reason why Philadelphia pulled the trigger on me. I was told Denver was going to take me in the 3rd round. The Jets had a ton
Did you have
of
an
interest.
agent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Victory Sports Group out of Montgomery, Alabama. They were a younger, newer agency, but they had plenty of talent, and Patrick Pinkston, who ended up being the guy that more or less recruited me into the agency, he was a good dude. He just was inexperienced.
So did you have a team you wanted to go to?
I didn't really have anything other than I didn't really want to go to the Northeast.
That's what it went.
When I kept hearing, the Jets have interest, and like, I was just like, oh no. And then sitting down and meeting with the whole Philadelphia Eagles organization. And that was the year they just lost in the Super Bowl to New England, a month before, 2 months before. I grew up and I admired that organization. I was a huge Chad Lewis fan, which he'd come back to BYU, and I talked to Chad all the time about what's it take to get here, you know?
Yeah.
And he'd just be like, oh, he'd tell me his story, and I'd just be floored.
Yeah.
But it kind of all made sense when you kind of looked at the guy and knew how humble and nice and just what a great person dude was. Like, just him basically saying right time, right place. I got lucky. I got cut. And then went home, and I was telling my wife, I don't know what we're going to do. And then they had like 2 injuries in Philadelphia, and they called him back, and they're like, get your ass back here. And so he went back there, and there was no other tight end on the team that could catch a football, but they were blockers. And he's just like, I basically walked in and started catching balls. And before I knew it, I started having, you know.
It's amazing in life and in sports how situation is so important, right? Because there's great, you know, there can be a great, and basketball is just where I spend so much of my time, but there can be a guy on one team who's nobody and goes to another team. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, you know, because the situation just fits. You know, you got to have the right situation. Correct.
And it's a lot of right time, right place, opportunity, luck, all that. Like one team's trash, another team's treasure, really. Because I mean, Philadelphia, because of a bad contract negotiation with me, a contract extension negotiation, turned the page on me. They drafted like 4 or 5 linemen. And I mean, I was in my 4th year or whatever there. And I knew by telling them, hey, we'll renegotiate at free agency or, you know, come back to us with a better offer. After 6 months of negotiating with the team, I knew I was done there.
Was that hard?
To say no?
Yeah.
I don't know too many people that walked away from $30-something million.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't all guaranteed money, but there. I can't remember what the terms of the contract were exactly. It's been so long, but I mean, if I would have just stayed healthy and just met my minimums, it would have been a $30 million deal.
That's crazy.
And to, I mean, I had other opportunities. Like when I went into free agency, I sat down with the Patriots for 2 days. I was the first athlete they brought in, and Coach Belichick's just like, I know everything about you. He's like, I want your hair. And I'm just like, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I respect everything you've done here. And I'm like praising him, and he's just like sitting there like looking at me like
like Bill Belichick.
Yeah. Like we don't need, but he's just like, he knew insider information on me. And I was just like, and he's like, we tried trading for you. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, we tried trading for you. And Coach Reed said, no, he's my starting left guard. I'm not gonna let him go. And so, just ironic that when Philadelphia cut me, Cleveland picked me up, but New England had also put in a
waiver claim
for me. Yeah. And I never got there because the year before, I think Cleveland had only won 10. I think New England had won like 13 or 14.
Yeah, because it goes the worst teams get the first opportunity.
So I ended up going there, and then it was just like when I hit free agency and sitting down with Belichick and like having him literally tell me preseason games I was playing against like Richard Seymour and Wilkeford and all his D linemen at the time. He's like, you kicked their ass. He's like, I don't need to say anything else. He's like, you'll come here and play. I'm like, I don't want to be in the Northeast. And, you know, I walk around the facilities. I see Randy Moss and like get introduced to him and their training staff and go through their whole, you know, all their MRIs and all their testing and everything. And like, I look back and I'm like, that's like the Pete Carroll moment of my college. It's like,
right.
I get to, you know, not a peak, but I get to a certain level and I have the best program wanting me. And I'm like, I want to like move back closer to home or, you know what I mean? And it wasn't me drawing back.
Yeah,
it was
right.
It was me being, it might have been just a jackass. I don't know. I might have been stupid, but like realistically to me, I'm like, I've earned this 5 years in the NFL right now. I'm like, I want to go back closer to home. I want to play on a team I want to play on.
That's why you went to Denver.
Yeah. And it, to me, it was just more my style. The linemen were a little smaller. And at the time I was trying to lose a little weight because I was like, you know, that many years in the NFL, carrying 320 to 330 pounds.
The listeners have to go look at one of your lineman pictures. It's so funny. Because look at you now, you're just a shredded beefcake, but God, you were just so big when you were a lineman.
Oh, I didn't have a neck.
No, you didn't. It's hilarious.
Man, I look back and I'm like, I wish somebody had pulled me aside and been like, dude, stay at 315, maybe 310 and just learn.
What do you weigh right now?
255.
Oh, so that's a huge difference in weight.
Yep.
God, I feel so much better.
Oh, it does. I mean, just the pressure that's off my like joints and like not constantly sweating and like breathing hard. I mean, there were years where I'm like, what am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're setting an alarm 2 a.m. to wake up and drink a 1,500 calorie like meal replacement, not protein drink, meal replacement.
You'd have to do that?
Oh yeah. And 3 hours before I was eating a tub of ice cream to up my calories. The nutritionist like, you gotta consume it. Depending on your day, it was between like 8,000 and 10,000 calories. And I'm like, for me
insane.
to eat 8,000 to 10,000 calories, that's like a full-time job. You're literally eating and keeping your stomach full all the time. And when you do that for year in and year out, and year in and year out,
sounds terrible.
It is terrible because you're always sick. You're always like bloated. You're always just like it became a job to eat. And to me, that was the polar opposite of what I liked. I like the fitness part of it. I like to lift, and I like to have a lower body fat than the majority of the linemen that that were in the league at the time. So to almost get transitioned into my body fat going up 5 to 10% and just feeling sluggish and that, like it demoralized me, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't feel like myself. And just constantly just felt sick.
Yeah, it's hard to, because I only know you as you now, right? I didn't know you then. And it's hard to imagine. Like I just couldn't imagine you just sitting there eating a tub of ice cream,
Oh, my mom told me years later, she's like, the most disgusted I've ever been in my life. And I was like, what? And she's like, when you were trying to meet weight, watching you eat. She said it was disgusting. And I was like, Mom, come on. I did what I had to do.
Oh, man. Okay, so I got a couple questions for you. Best stadium or the stadium you enjoyed playing in the most?
I'd say the Link. I mean, I know that sounds like,
that's
obviously
where the Eagles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say Link was my favorite. And I think, going into Green Bay and actually playing against Brett Favre in like one of his last games, like, that was iconic, and the fans, there's not a better fan base out there. I mean, normally you'd pull in and like whether you're going to Tampa or you're going wherever, 49ers, it didn't matter what team, you'd be pulling in and everyone was a rival with the Eagles. I mean, you went to Dallas and like they were chucking like
hate you
cups of who knows what at the bus.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine what it was. But we didn't get a warm welcome anywhere other than like when we went to Green Bay, I'm telling you, it's surreal because it's kind of like Foxborough where you almost feel like you're in your neighborhood and all of a sudden there's this beautiful stadium, this huge stadium right there. And you're like, but 3-4 blocks before you get at the stadium, it's like a parade and everyone's standing there clapping for you and chanting and yelling. And
it's like a small town.
Yeah. It was awesome. So I'd say Green Bay, atmosphere wise was like, it was there. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, the Meadowlands at the time was garbage.
What was the worst stadium?
I would say Arizona, because that's when they were sharing a stadium with ASU, and it was their old stadium before they just dumped who knows how many
billions
into that. But it was, your lockers were high school, college lockers, so you couldn't even fit your pads in them, your helmet wouldn't fit, nothing. Like, I mean, it was
wow.
It was.
Who had the best locker room?
Outside of Philadelphia at the time.
So Philadelphia's was good.
Oh yeah. I mean, if Phillies at the time was
because they were good then, right? Yep. Donovan McNabb and Westbrook. I mean, that was like, you guys were awesome.
New England's was a really, really, really nice facility. But yeah, I would say Phillies at the time was like the standout. I mean, it was one of the newer stadiums, and they dumped a ton of money into that, and it was just everything, even like visiting and home were. I mean, it was a special place.
Who was your best teammate in the NFL?
Best as far as like friendship or just overall athlete?
Like as a teammate, just like the guy you could always count on, always doing good for the team, always getting people's morale up. Like, who was the best person to be around when you were in the NFL?
He didn't have a very big voice, but Ryan Moats.
Yep.
Running back out of La Tech, he set records there. He ended up playing like 6-7 years. He played for Houston for a couple of years, Philly for a few years. He was my best friend on the team, but that guy was the most optimistic, positive person. I think one of the most optimistic and positive people I've ever met. He was a true entrepreneur. He was always going back, and I was always rooming with him. And he was a really good, just really good person inside out.
Okay.
He was always like on his MacBook designing up, you know, what his sneakers were going to look like. And he was always pushing himself, and he's just a stud, I mean, we had him, his wife, Tamisha, and I had a really good relationship, and I was kind of the third wheel on a lot of things with them. And we had some knockdown, drag out fights where she had to like get involved. I mean, obviously not
you and him.
Yeah. Not physical, but like verbally, like
you guys get at it.
We about historical stuff, like treatment of like the Scots by the English, and like literally like just like,
well, that's, you know, you have a good friend and you can go at it and you're still have a friendship.
Oh yeah.
What about the worst teammate you ever had? Who was the biggest asshole?
I'd say T.O.
Terrell Owens.
Yeah.
So you were on the Eagles when Terrell Owens was there?
I watched him and Hugh Douglas box. Just, I mean, they literally street brawled in the training room. It was like me, Rick, the head trainer, and maybe like 2 or 3 other people. And
Hugh Douglas was a defensive, was he a linebacker?
Yeah, linebacker, DN linebacker. So T.O., like a few days prior, had him and Donovan McNabb were yelling in our team meeting, and it was man, that was such a good Eagles team. Yeah, it was world news. I mean, they were going to T.O.'s house. He was doing sit-ups in his driveway. All of us were sweating it out at camp and just getting pissed off. He's over there eating ice cream, and we're like at Lehigh, and it's 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and this dude's just breezing through camp, and everyone knows he's not going to get cut. He's going to come in there and start the second he puts on the pad, you know? And so a lot of people resented him for it, and he took a team that was the most talented in the NFL by far. I mean, the Jeremiah Trotter, Javon Curse,
you guys were
Trey
good.
Thomas.
He ruined that whole dynamic.
Oh yeah, I mean that team was stacked. It was. I mean, Brian Dawkins, McNabb, Westbrook. I mean, Terrell Buckhalter. I mean, you go through that team, and there were very few people where you're like, who is that? And I was probably one of those names at first, and it was humbling to go to a program like that. But I think the damage he did from the core of that team actually. You know, we ended up still making it a couple rounds of the playoffs that year. But I think the damage he did to that team that year was irreversible. Yeah. Because he set the tone for the whole year of drama.
Before the camp even started. That's an iconic thing, him in his driveway doing sit-ups.
Oh, yeah. It was a big deal, like hold out. And I can't remember all the details of it, but he showed up, and there were only like a few people that would like really like interact with him and still talk to him and try and like bring him back into the team and trying to create peace there. But like he just came in and he just had a chip on his shoulder, and it was just like I remember him and McNabb when they had that fight in the team meeting, and the coaches were asked to leave, and those two just went back and forth jawing each other, and then I saw him snapping at other people for days, and then
finally Hugh Douglas just had enough.
And I think Hugh was just like, dude, you got enough is enough, and he just came at him, and I can't remember what exact words were said, but then there were punches going, and we were all trying to grab him, and it was just, I mean, full on swinging at each other and yelling, and it was pretty chaotic. So, I mean, that's a pretty simple answer. I'd never seen anything like that at junior college. High school, I'd never seen anything at any level of sports until, that guy prima donna, and maybe he just wanted his voice heard, and he has his own perspectives and opinions. So that's
sure. That's his reality.
Yeah, it's his reality. And like, you can't be upset at somebody fighting for, their
beliefs,
way of life, and their beliefs, and how they feel and how they've been treated, and what way they feel is owed to them, or whatever else. I mean, that's actually respectable in a lot of terms, in a lot of cases.
Was Donovan McNabb a good leader?
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah.
Would you say that was his team? Like, was he the voice of that team, or who was like the real voice?
For sure.
Yeah.
And he was more soft-spoken, but he had a presence, and everyone really, really respected him. Funny story about him is we had just got through like OTAs, rookie camp, all that stuff. And we were just wrapping up OTAs, and my parents had flew into town or whatever. And I'm like, I want to show you my locker, And so I got permission, and there's like, just make sure no one else is in the locker room. Just make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
You're good to go. So I go in there, I look around, I don't see anybody. I don't hear, the showers or anything. I'm just like, all right. go grab my parents. I no sooner turn the corner with them and McNabb's standing there in a bathrobe. And I'm like, fuck, I'm cut. I'm a rookie. I'm just afraid to even walk around this time. I'm like,
yeah, right.
A couple months into this program, and I'm just like, okay, what's going to go on? I'm just nervous about this. He walked right up to my parents. Oh, you're Scott Young's parents. Shook their hands. How long are you in town? What are you guys going to do? Go to this place. You got to check out this place.
How cool.
Go eat here. And he literally, I mean, my parents, they didn't even bat an eye. They acted like everything was normal. And I mean, that's kind of how they were through the whole process. Like sitting down and, Javon Curse is sitting there smoking a cigar and drinking shots of Jaeger. My dad, right next to my dad, and they're sitting there laughing and talking. I'm like, this is surreal.
Yeah, no kidding.
What's going on here? I mean, this is my old man and my mom, and my family's being introduced into this.
Yeah,
I'm just
right.
Still trying to wrap my mind around it all. It was a trip.
And what round were you drafted?
5th.
And did you have like a party? Were you guys all watching the draft? Like, what was that like as you're waiting to see if your name was going to get called?
We had a pretty big draft party. The day when it was the first and second round on the first day when they're stacked. And I didn't expect to go till 3rd round. Mel Kiper had me, I think. It was actually the pick where Maurice Clarett got picked up to Denver. That was what I was told. What I was told I was going to go.
I remember as a Broncos fan, I was excited. I thought, because he was so good at college. He was like a freak. And I thought like, oh, what a good draft. He never ended up doing anything.
But everything had come down to that. And I hit Mel Kiper's top 5 value board. I'd say the first part of the 3rd round, and I sat on that.
Was that hard?
Oh yeah, like it was demoralizing because I was actually starting to see people I knew and being like, oh my gosh, I'm like I got all the potential in the world, but that's all they kept saying is he's all potential. He's only played one year of offensive line, like he needs to develop, and like what team?
That's pretty amazing. You made it to the NFL, to be an offensive lineman after only having played 1 year of offensive line, and that's pretty incredible.
To be a top 10 guard 1 year in when no one knew who I was. I mean, there was no publicity. There was nothing. I mean, I just came in, played, and played the best of my ability. And if I would have had a year under my belt per se, and actually played 1 year of offensive line and then had my senior year, it would have been a completely different story. But I mean, you can't turn back the clock.
You can't change the past. What was it like when you did get drafted? So did the agent call you and tell you that, hey, it's happening, or did you see it happen on TV? Like, how did that come about?
Just got a phone call, and I knew. Like, I mean, when you're waiting, 2 full days, and like finally you see like a different area code pop up on your phone, and I'm just like answered, and it was Coach Reed and Howie Roseman and the whole team, and they're just like, hey, we're gonna select you, this pick, and then like,
what was that like for you?
Oh shit.
Was it like, because that is a lifetime of work.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the mountaintop of like, it actually happened. And then you had to do all the work to keep it and to be in it. But like, you'd work so hard for so long for that phone call. Did you feel that sense of like accomplishment or success, or
not at all?
Isn't that interesting?
It immediately gave me a chip on my shoulder because I had watched myself slide from where I felt I deserved to be drafted to basically 2 rounds later. And to me, although it was humbling and they were one of the best teams in the NFL at the time, I was like, this isn't how it's supposed to go.
Isn't the psychology of human life interesting? Because if someone said to you, when you put on the football pads in 9th grade, said you were going to get drafted in the NFL, you'd be like, hell yeah. You'd be just so excited. Then it actually happens. And we're met with a sense of frustration, and like it doesn't give you that thing you think it would give you, because that's just life. Because it's like, now you got it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to prove you all wrong because you should have drafted me earlier.
Yeah, and when I say this, I'm not comparing myself in any way, shape, or form to like Tom Brady or, Aaron Rodgers, who actually was probably one of the last people in my draft class that's still playing.
Yeah.
But I mean, they went into it with a chip on their shoulder, and they're just like, I'm going to pencil off every single player that went in front of me, and I'm going to be better than them, And I kind of had that attitude without like having somebody tell me that. I kind of had that. I'm like, I'm going to show everyone up, and like, I wasn't expected to really even go in and make the team.
Sure.
And so to me, yeah, I could have signed a contract extension, which would have kept me in Philadelphia for 8-9 years probably. And I'm sure it would have gave me a pretty historic career. And I might have ended up living on the East Coast. I don't know. I don't know what
it's crazy because then you wouldn't have your daughter, right? And so it's like you can't, like you said, you can't go back and change anything. But I think it's good for the listeners to hear that, like, because when you're an outsider, like for me, you're in the NFL, I just think, God, it's the coolest thing in the whole world, you know? But when you're an outsider and you see other people's success and you can have that sense of like, oh gosh, how would that be? But everyone's success is different. And everyone, even when you have that success, still has moments of like, that's not how I wanted it to be.
Correct.
You know? So that's what life is. And so I think for the young people, especially listening, like don't put so much weight on this future thing, because then you get there and it may not be the way you wanted it to be anyways. And you're holding off all this appreciation for this thing that when it happens, you may not even feel the way that you think that you're going to.
Oh, correct. And it'd be even take that a little further and kind of a skew off or a different angle on that is the people I've had these conversations with are, it's few and far between. But everyone's just like, well, yeah, but what would happen if you would have gone and got paralyzed or shattered your leg, and then you like literally were more or less disabled for the rest of your life. And like, I mean, however you want to look at it and whatever perspective you have, but I'm telling you this right now, there's no amount of money that I would give up. And this is the honest God truth. There's no amount of money I'd give up to be where I'm at right now and have my daughter and
of course. Yeah.
And the times where I was making the most amount of money in my life were some of the most miserable, high pressured. I felt liable to everything, like my car insurance, like the premiums I paid just for car insurance on the cars I had, versus just being, a normal civilian, whatever you want to call what normal life is. But
no, it's fine. It's funny. I tell people, like, don't wish for something else because you don't know what it takes to be there.
Yep.
I remember when I was young and money was so important to me, and you have a friend who's making all this money and you think, God, I wish I had that. But if you knew all the work it took to have that thing, then you may not feel that way. Like knowing you had to eat 10,000 calories a day, like I wouldn't want that.
No.
So it's like, you're totally right.
And now like, yeah, I made a chunk of money and it, I was smart with my money and I stashed most of it away so I can retire at 45 if I want to. That's not the point. I can't ever get back what I did. Like the damage I've done to my body.
Yeah.
Even though like I work every day and I do special training to keep my joints to where I can actually have mobility, range of motion, and like strength. Yeah. Like I've had to change that up. I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't be there for another 20 years.
Yeah.
But I'm now paying for everything that I gave up to be in that position.
Yeah.
And to say I'd be in a different position if I would have just, put my head down, gone to work, gone to school, made something of myself. I don't know. I don't know who that person would be and what that would look like.
And it's really a waste of effort anyways, because that's not who you are, right?
Even looking back and dwelling on that contract extension but you know what? With all the failures I've had and all the things where I can look back and be like, oh shit, I had a false start in a playoff game in front of the whole world.
Yeah.
I also sprung Brian Westbrook for a 70-yard touchdown.
Right.
So there's always another side of that.
Yeah.
It really is perspective.
Yeah, there's duality in everything.
Yeah, and to me, like, why dwell on the shit you can't control? Like, worry about the stuff you can change and you can actually, alter moving forward. If you worry about the stuff from the past, you're stuck in the past.
Yeah, it's not a good place to be.
No, it's depressing and it's like demoralizing and it takes away.
Did it take time for you to get that perspective of like not taking that contract extension? Did it take a few years or a while to finally come to peace with like, okay, that already happened. I can't change it now. I got to just.
It took a decade.
Yeah, I bet.
I would say the last 2-3 years, I've finally like come into my own where I'm like, you know what, I'm where I should be. I mean, it's
the only place you can be is where you are.
Yeah, and you know what, like I look at it, not to sound cliche or anything. I look at it like I was blessed. I had an opportunity that very few people get.
Yeah,
I took something from this. I set myself up and hopefully.
And now you get all this time with your daughter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What a blessing.
I've had a killer opportunity to have some great business partners and we just keep developing stuff and having fun with that. And, it's given me the ability to be a stay-at-home dad since COVID hit. Like I've been in the office, a handful of times and I'm fortunate enough to be in the position I was, but I had to buy myself my way into that position. It wasn't given to me.
Right.
And I had to make investments that I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd have just worked my way up.
Of course. Yeah.
So the opportunities and the position I put myself in, excelling at sports and like, being a standout athlete and making it into the NFL and then like actually getting to the retirement and checking the boxes that were my most important.
Yeah.
My most important wasn't like, I got to make $100 million.
Right.
My most important, like, you got to be in that percent of action. Cause I mean, I can't remember what the stats were, but it's like some of the stats that always stood out to me were like, I think it was like at the time, the average drafted career was like 2.2 years. Well, you got to play 4 credited season, which could be 6 years to get it for retirement. Well, I checked that off. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I look
at so many athletes leave with nothing.
Oh yeah. Or they leave with a lot and they're bankrupt 2 years later.
That's what I mean. They end up with nothing. You know?
For sure. And you know, I'm not going to say I haven't had some failed business dealings between then and now, because I've had more failed than
success.
More success. And again, like winning the moment, like I do wake up every day and try to win the moment, but I'm also well-rounded in the fact that I'm like, I'm not going to be one of those dads that, you know, gives up everything with my daughter, like gives up all the time with my daughter, and I'm just non-existent with them when I'm with her because I'm grinding for all these people. Yeah. Whereas I feel like I take care of my clients and the people I work with, my partners. I'm not going to give up anything because I know I can't buy that time back with them.
Right.
Those windows close.
Absolutely. And even as soon as she gets into school, then that's 8 hours a day that you lose with her. Right. Yep. And so she's at that age right now where she's just with you most of the time. Yep. And that's a precious small part of life. And we just talked, it's been 4 years, you know, as when things go by so fast. And so it's like time just goes like this. Yep. You know, and as soon as Hazel gets to that, you know, 12, 13 age, then she wants to be with her friends. And so it's like, you think you've got 18 years, but really the window's much smaller than that.
Yeah. And I think the experience I've gained is something I'm going to be able to pass on to her, whether I have any more kids or get married or get remarried at some point in time, that's up in the air. But I know for a fact the experience and education I can pass along to her and say, like, you know, I did this, and this. Yeah. You know, but even the listeners, it's like, since I was little, my own flesh and blood dad, and people told me I couldn't do stuff. They told me I wouldn't make anything of myself in sports. Well, I think I proved them wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
And as sick as it sounds, maybe that was a lot of like my motive when I was little. The desire, for sure. Yeah, it was like I loved sports, but it was also like when somebody tells you can't do something and you know in your being and your soul and everything else that you can.
It's interesting too, because that's one of those things that could be perceived as a negative, but really it was a positive, because that sense of non-belief in you created a desire that propelled you to the greatness that you had.
100%. And it's hard when the closest people to you don't believe in you, or maybe they believe in you, but for some other personal reason,
they don't want that to be your path,
and they cast doubt on you, like, oh, you're never going to amount to anything. I mean, from my sister to my dad to close friends and family, but I mean, I still had a ton of support. I mean, my mom was always like, you can do anything
so you started out the podcast saying your mom was such an influential part. Okay, so last football question. Who was the most impressive athlete you shared the field with that you were just like, whoa?
You know, I'd say, I mean, that's a loaded one, because if you're talking about somebody I actually played against, like actually one-on-one, or if you're talking about somebody I looked at on the field and was like, holy shit. Both. I would say Michael Vick, in person. I mean, Brandon Jacobs, I believe that was running back at New York at the time, was a specimen. I mean, he looked like, I mean, I don't...
Like a refrigerator with legs.
Yeah. Like a Derrick Henry, but even bigger. Like, I mean, I saw people like Julius Peppers, scary.
Yeah. Looked and like you went up against him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Javon Curse, absolutely 2% body fat, 6'6" or 6'7", and like 280 pounds or whatever the hell he was.
All muscle. Yeah, I would think seeing Vic on person on the field would just be like, because I would have thought like Lamar Jackson now, like being on the field with him and seeing him just run past and by the fastest people in the world. It's like, whoa.
I think for sure Michael Vick was the most impressive, looking at him on the field, and like had watched him for many years from like just on TV, was phenomenal. Insanely quick, just unreal fast. Yeah, there's a lot of people, and I know you just asked for basically one, but I think I was fortunate enough to be in an era and time on a team, as well as teams I played against, where I saw some of the best athletes on the planet. And
absolutely,
a lot of them could have stepped into. I mean, if they would have sculpted themselves that way, they could have probably played in the NBA. Like somebody like
of
Javon
course,
Kurtz,
yeah. Because Javon Kurtz did play college at North Carolina. Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's absolutely true. It's just whatever path they choose.
Well, he was an absolute freak of nature. Julius Peppers was absolutely scary. Like, I mean, a Greek god scary. Vic was the fastest, most fluid, athletic specimen that you could have ever seen. Like, just unreal. But then there are other people that like your Frank Gores and Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre's. And I mean, I fortunately got to see the majority of them play. Your Peyton Mannings, your Tom Brady's, like 20 yards from shake their hand after a game. Got to sit there.
That's so cool.
Thinking back now, I'm like, that's surreal.
It is, absolutely.
At the time, you didn't take it for granted, but it was just work. These were just people.
Of course.
Because when you walk in and see their names in the locker room and you're just looking at it and you're like, holy shit, no one deserves to be in this locker room but these people.
Yeah, right.
2 weeks later, you're sitting down eating lunch with them and like bullshitting about them eating ketchup sandwiches growing up. They were so poor. And it's like,
we're all just people at the end of the day.
I thought I had it bad growing up, but that's pretty bad.
Okay, so next question then. What's the biggest win in your life? And for me, when I say that, you can define win in whatever way that you want. But what's the biggest win that sticks out to you in your life?
You know, besides being a father and having a little girl I love more than anything on the planet, which kind of speaks for itself. I mean, I think most parents genuinely.
Yeah. Family is a lot of times the answer.
That really was like a top win for me. I mean, having to do IVF and
because you guys had to struggle through that, right? It took a lot of work to
had that really bad miscarriage, and we had stuff pop up that, you know, could all be looked at like part of the story. But like, I would say ultimately my biggest win has been able to help people, and not to the level I feel like I wanted to yet.
Sure.
But my biggest win is being able to help people, whether it's clients, seeing them succeed and seeing how it changes their family, taking somebody has a idea to walking them through the patent process, to walking them through the branding, building them a website, getting their e-commerce going, marketing for them, watching them go into retail, watching them get to a point where you're like, that family has generational money now.
Yeah.
That's not a family that sells that and makes $10, $20 million and set forever. That family is going to have it made as long as they keep the course, stay the path. And I think being able to help other people personally, you know, my relationships, you know, I've mentored a lot of kids over the years. Just I haven't wanted to get back into coaching. I was
just going to ask that. Yeah, that was going to be your next question.
I get asked all the time. I mean, I got asked this year to coach the new JV team here in Southern Utah, and I get asked, I'd say multiple times every year, from high school to
you just not interested.
I gave it too much of my life.
Yeah, you've already paid your dues.
I like raising my daughter. I like being able to hunt. I like the outdoors, fishing, hunting. I like to do me. I gave that up for like since I first started playing sports, 4 or 5 years old, till, you know, basically my 30s. That's all I did. That's all I knew.
Right.
And so for me, like, one of my best friends.
That chapter's closed.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, I look at it, and Sean New was my roommate at BYU. Got drafted, won a Super Bowl ring with the Steelers. He was Harbaugh's D-line coach in Michigan for 3-4 years, something like that. He was Herm Edwards' D-line coach in ASU before that, and now he's sitting on the USC team. And I think last year he might have won, like, defensive line coach of the year. And, and I look at him, and we message back and forth here and there on, you know, social media, and I just see the success of what he's doing and what he's been able to accomplish. And I'm like, I guess I didn't have the same love he had, even though he was born and raised in Samoa and came here and couldn't barely speak a lick of English, went to junior college, made his way to BYU, went up, you know, becoming roommates and having a really cool friendship. I'm so proud of him, but he had something different in him.
Yeah, it wasn't your path.
No, because I saw what all the coaches went through. I saw the Juan Castillo, my online coach in Philly, for 4 years. I watched that guy.
Oh God, the effort that coaches put in, especially at the NFL level, like they live there.
And he supported his sons, and he had a boy that played at Iowa State, and like he always had him like at the facility for a couple hours here and there. So it's not like he was an absent father. But I'm like, I remember having to talk with him one time in his office, and I'm like, when was the last time he was home? He was like 3 months ago. I'm like, he had a bed in his office, and he's like, yeah, I just stay here. And I'm just like,
yeah,
never.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there's situations where people might get a little bit more leniency and free time than that, but most of them, they don't.
Oh no, yeah, they live. I mean, that is their life, right?
Yeah, they get through the season, and then it's like recruiting and
never
scouting,
stops.
and
Well, it sounds like from what you said too, so much of yours was the competitiveness, like you being a competitor and an athlete, right? And so that's what your drive was, to be the best athlete that you could be. So the opposite side of that then is, and we talked a little bit about this off camera before we started, but what's your biggest loss?
That's a tough one, because I'd have to segment that into personal and then professional. And whereas I've made bad business dealings and different things, like turning down a contract that most people would be virtually ill over.
Yeah, if you asked anyone, would you take a $30 million contract? The answer would be yes, always.
Yeah. Well, we won't talk about that one anymore. I've had a lot of failures, and I want people, and this is full transparency, from losing a marriage, from, walking away from football on my own, then a year later saying, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
Because of absolute,
I couldn't imagine the turmoil of that.
I've had a lot of losses, I mean, I've been fortunate and blessed to be where I'm at and have the path that I've had. I've had a lot of losses that I could go on and on and on. And most people are like, well, that's not cancer and that's not this. I mean, I know I'm blessed.
Yeah.
And I know I've had
it. Doesn't change that the losses are real for you.
Yeah, 100%. So I've had a lot of losses where people like sit back and they're like, oh, you're resilient and that you're just bouncing through these. And I'm not. I'm trying to focus on like being the best I can every day and getting up, challenging myself, pushing myself, helping people, where I still get enough love from that and enough satisfaction and self-worth from it of helping other people and staying the course and trying to live my life to the fullest, work hard, play hard, have a good time, but still not worry about others' expectations. Cause I always, if I hold myself to high on a standard that somebody doesn't need to put something on me and say, you got to be this way or that way. Cause I already know when I've made mistakes, I already know. No one needs to tell me.
Well, and I think what's great about that too, is really what you're saying is losses are just intertwined in our life, right? And you're going to deal with them all the time, always. There's never a point in your life where you can say, oh, I'm done losing until you're dead. Right. And so as long as you want to be alive, you've got to be okay knowing that you're going to have losses intermingled throughout your life. And I think your message of like, I know when I messed up.
Yep. And go into a crowd, throw a rock in any direction. You're going to hit somebody that can tell you the struggles they're going through. And a lot of times you're like, damn, dude.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like that. I don't know how you're even standing up. Like the losses of family and the tragic stuff you see in here and the cancers and the people who lose their kids and stuff. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, it's all over the place. So to me, like you just said, like you still film and they're still real to you and they're still painful. I also know I haven't experienced what is yet to come, because there's going to be losses. Like I always envision like when I lose my parents and like how that's going to hurt, and just things throughout life, just cyclical things of life, like that we all experience and can share. Different names, different faces, but
it kind of goes back to what you said about the only place you can be is right here and right now, right? Correct. And so whatever losses you had, they're not here right now. Yep. So it's like once you've got that in your past, then that's over. Just like you said, your contract thing is in the past. It's over now. It may have taken you a decade to get over it, but once you're able to leave that in the past.
Correct.
It doesn't affect you anymore in your day-to-day life.
And you know what? I think you can take winning from every loss, and you can take
absolutely. I think eventually all losses turn into wins with enough time.
Yep.
Because then you can look back with perspective and say, man, I'm so glad that happened. Because just like with the contract, you can look back and say, I'm so glad that happened because the biggest win in my life is Hazel. And if you sign that contract, then Hazel doesn't exist.
Correct.
So I think that's absolutely true. So last question then, I think it's so important that people get so tied up in society's definition of success, right? And so I think, especially for the younger generation, striving to have these things that society tells them they need. And I think that gets people stuck in a rat race. So how do you define success?
That's a good one. I think success to me is the people who are in your, not just your inner circle, but the people who actually know you are proud of you.
I like that.
I think that the success to me is being selfless and always trying to take care of other people and help better other people's lives, even if it's just a compliment.
Yeah.
Or
that's funny. We were talking about that earlier today with the podcast People Blue Form, because he just started his own podcast, Blake, and I complimented on him and he's like, man, thank you so much for that. It's like, so often people don't ever show appreciation. So you don't know, you're just going along and hoping you're doing well. But when someone who you have a relationship is willing to say, hey, you're doing great, it's like, that feels so good, Yeah.
And I've been a shitty person at points in times in my life.
Haven't we all?
and I think your job as a person and part of your responsibility with society and friends and family and whatnot and loved ones is, ultimately, even parents you're going to be upset at your kid for what X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But when you see them trying and you see them learning and not making that same mistake, that pride, that feeling you get right there, I want to give that to other people.
Yeah.
And even though my circles have shrank over the years, I still want people to be proud of me. And I know even my biggest, like I had said with my older sister and my dad, like that were the first doubters in me. And the ones telling me I couldn't do something. I would never amount to anything in sports. It wasn't rubbing it in their face that I became an All-American college and got drafted and played in the NFL and retired from the NFL. It wasn't checking those off and saying, okay, now I proved them wrong. But I think it was the rewards of seeing their face meeting these players and sitting down to dinner with them.
Giving them those experiences. I
think it was the years later hearing how proud they are of me giving them those opportunities. And, I don't want my life to be vanilla, and I don't want to sit back and say I could have done something different or done more. But I'm also to a point in time in my life where, I'm trying to keep my priorities where I feel like they're best suited and still trying to help people and still trying to be a dad first and try and figure out the next chapters of my life, which seems to be taking longer and longer.
Well, what's cool for you is like you had this really successful career as an athlete, but you've also had a really successful career just as a business person, right? So it's like you've written a completely new story. Like what you just shared about helping those people, all of your clients, it's really cool that you've had success in a lot of different ways. And now with your daughter at the age she's at, now you're getting to write that chapter of being successful with her as a dad, So
Correct.
It's like you're just always really in everything that you've done in your life. I think you've just been really successful, and it's fun to watch all the new chapters start.
Yeah. And this next chapter, I'm writing it with different teammates.
Yeah.
Like my business partners now, we've got some really cool stuff going and I sit back and on one hand, I feel guilty that I'm not doing more, but I'm doing the best I can given the circumstance of being a single dad and and trying to raise my daughter and not give those times away. But I think that's probably going to be my next win. And this is one thing I can share with everybody is when I left the NFL and everyone was just telling you're a dumbass. You're seriously stupid. You're giving up how much a year? You're never going to be able to make that, outside of sports. I think that was kind of that was my
prove
family,
you wrong.
Yeah. My family telling me I couldn't be a pro athlete or amount to anything. So to me, not just once, but multiple times, I want to be okay, I did X, Y, and Z in the business world. And I went from not having a business degree or knowing anything about it as a sink or swim moment to, hey, look at some of the stuff my partners and I developed. I'm one piece of the puzzle and one teammate, but when you look back and you see some of the stuff that we started out and have built, like St. George and Cedar City News.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
We just sold a software to a company in North Carolina a few months ago that, is life-changing for a family we sold it to. It just lost their dad. And we've been doing stuff that, like our new Elite Insights business. I guess not necessarily new, but it's really hitting the market and kind of spreading out now. Those are some things where Whereas I'm not as active on the day-to-day with those, and I have amazing partners that are hands-on with those. I'm running a part of the business that's helped
made that all possible.
Yeah, build these other business. And I'm not taking any credit or giving any pat on the back to myself. I'm just saying, like, there's things that I feel like, now I'm a teammate in this partnership. And one day I will be able to look back, and my main partner, Shane, one day we were talking, when we partnered with a company that took over the day-to-day operations of St. George and Cedar City News. We looked at each other, and whereas we didn't get to where we felt like we could at the moment before partnering and merging with another company, we actually were sitting there and we're talking, and where it was kind of depressing moment and humbling, it was kind of relieving, and it was nice to have somebody else coming to help take in some of the HR and stuff that you know we didn't have the foundation for, and we looked at each other and we're just like, what's damn cool is one day we're gonna be able to look back, and these companies aren't gonna be small, and we're gonna be able to say, remember when we were sitting and whiteboarding that out and we didn't know what the hell we're doing? And we're just sitting there like, a news company? Like, we're looking at each other like, we're web developers and we're marketers. What the hell are we doing? You know, we took something none of us had a clue about, and, you know, we took it to a certain level, and then partnered with a company that could help us take it to a whole nother level. And one day I'll be able to, you know, talk to Hazel and be like, you know, like this, even though it's just St. George and it's just a regional market,
it's still a big deal.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, your old man was a part of. It wasn't just a football player, you know. Like,
we got a lot of stories.
I had to challenge myself to grow outside of like what my God-given and dedication enabled me to get through athletics.
I think it's cool too to show the audience like that you can pivot in your life, and just because you're doing something now doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Right? Like you completely pivoted out of sports into an entirely new arena and found success there. And I think oftentimes people feel stuck and like, well, I'm so far down the road doing this, I have to just keep doing it. But that's not true. You can always pivot in life and decide whatever direction you want to go.
I think you have to pivot in life.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to make the most of it, for sure.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to look back and say, oh, I mean, we all are going to look back and have regrets.
But you don't want to look back and say my life was boring or average or just the exact same every day.
Yeah, and I didn't make the best of it. I had a regular 9 to 5. I didn't push myself. I didn't I didn't make the impact. Even though I think everyone makes an impact in other people's lives in their own life. I think some people
you want to be driving your life, not have your life driving you.
100%.
So, anything you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
No, I think just what we've kind of touched on quite a bit is like, you know, I still believe my losses in life, like you'd said, have become wins, but my losses trump my wins. And I think anybody and everybody, if you're dedicated and work hard and get up and push yourself, whatever you aspire to be or do or achieve, you can if you're just willing to sacrifice enough to get there. Yeah, there's a lot of right time, right place, lucky situations that
you create those situations if you're really putting all that work out there. You know, I think you're totally right. Whatever you want to achieve, you absolutely can. And again, you know, you could get stuck saying like it's cliche to say if you believe it, you can achieve it, but it's just true. Go look at any person who's at any level of success and listen to what they say or read their stories, and everyone's got that same message. Like you absolutely can do it if you want to.
Yeah, and I've had to tell myself recently to get off your ass. You know, where I feel like I kind of get in some ruts where I'm like content and just
get a little complacent.
Yeah, complacent for sure. And I think a lot of it is just get off your ass and do what you want, you know, like make something of this.
Or do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, hold yourself accountable.
Just work hard. And I mean, I think anybody can be coached and trained to, you know, take something into a niche or an area that they aspire to go into or just naturally talented at.
Yeah.
And do something with it. Because if you don't take those things you were born with, those God-given skills, so to speak, like if you don't take that and do anything with it, you not only wasted your own fucking life, you're not helping anybody else out.
Opportunity, absolutely.
You're not helping anybody else out that, you know, somebody wants to hear your message, you know, and,
of course.
And whether somebody today takes anything and aspires them to do something else, I mean, that's to be, you know, we'll see. But like, to me, I think stepping outside your comfort zone and just get off your ass. I mean, like that's
the tagline of the episode. Get off your ass.
Get off your ass.
That's a great way to end it. So if people want to connect with you or learn more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm an open book on Facebook, Instagram. Just hit me up.
I'll put all that in the show notes so people can just click right over to it and get more of your story.
Yeah, and you can also hit like the company I run on the day-to-day is called Online Web Marketing. It's kind of archaic name, and it's not, we haven't rebranded or anything.
I'll include that.
We try to do Catch Digital, and like we try to do that, but we're so busy taking care of our clients that we don't even market ourselves.
It's funny. It's easy to get stuck in that where it's like you are a marketing company, but you forget to market for yourself because you're too busy doing it for your clients.
Yeah, don't look at our website. It's like 10 years old. But no, yeah, you can find my email, all my contact info there. But like, yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to network or whatever else, yeah, like hit me up. Facebook, Instagram, website, whatever.
Okay, I'll include that. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was super fun. I even heard stories I hadn't heard before, so that was a treat. But thank you for doing this with me.
We'll do it again. Thanks, brother. I love you.
I love you too, man.
Okay.